question back to us was very simply, I don't mind any of that, but is he going to do a good job for London? And that's what they were interested in. And that's why when a lot of people look at Boris's history in politics and they think, how on earth was he able to be successful whilst having these issues surround him? The voters back then thought, well, we don't mind about that, just do the right thing for London.
Well, let's bring in Will Walden. Will, you were Boris Johnson's Director of Comms and External Affairs and his chief spokesman during his second term as mayor. But in the campaign for his first term, you were the Westminster news editor at the BBC, sitting a few desks away. What were your impressions of Boris Johnson, the poacher before you became a gamekeeper?
Sorry, I think Adam, like most people from afar, I'd met him a few times. I didn't know him particularly well, but that great sort of sense that I think all of us in the Westminster Village have of the great showman. He was the biggest figure in the Tory body that held elected office from 2008 to 2010, and certainly, our view of him in Westminster was that, he was a man with unbridled ambition. Put it that way.
More on that later. Alex, when you were out on the campaign trail with Boris Johnson, the candidate, what was he like as a candidate?
He displayed all of the characteristics that we know about him. He was incredibly energetic. He would attract a crowd wherever he went. The crowd was mostly positive, and it was the kind of crowd that you just wouldn't get in the Tory party. I lost count of the number of times we'd be walking down a high street in outer London, and the most attention you'd ever get was typically a white van that would be driving past, and every single time without fail, honking the horn, leaning out, "Hey Boris, go on, good luck to you." And show me a politician in our history that has attracted that kind of positive response, shall we say, from that demographic. Not very many. So that was the positive element. The negative element, of course, was that on an election campaign, you actually have to be extremely disciplined, because if you're not, particularly when you come up against an opponent of the calibre of Ken Livingstone, if you're not, you very quickly lose your way. And what Boris really struggled with was simply staying in a straight line, just staying on the campaign field that we knew were going to beat Livingstone, because don't forget, even though he won that election reasonably comfortably, it was a long, hard slog, and Livingstone was ahead for an awful lot of the race. And as I say, he was nailed on for re-election. So it required a really big swing in order to get over the line. And there were many cases where his aides would they'd be shouting at him in exasperation, just tidy your hair, stick to the line, and he would always resist. So much so that once he, in our campaign office, he actually went and hid when things got too bad. He would go off into another room and hide, and we'd spend ages looking for him and say, "Where's Boris?" Our offices were in the old County Court by the Thames, just opposite Westminster. And at that time, there was a Star Wars / film exhibition in the rooms next to our offices. So not only did you have the Star Wars theme tune playing on the walls of the Towers Day, which was a wonderful soundtrack to the campaign, we also had a storage room across the hall, and the storage room had lots of film props and sets in it. And one of these props was a coffin. So when things got just a bit too much for Boris, he would slip out into the corridor, and people would try and find him. Eventually, someone found him hiding in this prop coffin.
The Empire Struck Back. And to carry on with the Star Wars theme, is there a sort of shadowy emperor-like figure pulling the strings in the background?
There most certainly was, and those of us who realised that we had to get to grips very quickly with Boris Johnson's style as a hopeful mayor and follow the campaign and understand it, had to get to know Lynton Crosby, who was this great Australian polling and election strategist come guru, the Lizard of Oz. You've got all those actually rather rude things that people say about Australians that they're just expected to take if they come into British politics. But Lynton Crosby was in some ways the answer to the lack of discipline problem that you just heard there outlined, and Boris Johnson's tendency to disappear and hide in coffins or whatever was to hand. Because Linton Crosby told me at the time that the way that he looked at a candidate like that, with that psychological profile, was that you needed to think of it as a stir fry. That there were only going to be a few ingredients that you could make a pretty good stir fry if you knew what you were doing with a few ingredients. If you then said, no, I really think it should be a bit different, or haven't we got prawns today, no, we've only got the mange to, then it will all go wrong, he said, because this candidate simply can't bring you the mange to. So he said his job with Boris Johnson was to figure out those ingredients in that Boris Johnson mix and make it work to the positive. That was his, I think, what he really brought to that campaign. And I think Boris Johnson was also, he was a little bit scared of Linton. He wasn't scared of many people.
And the combination worked then, because Boris Johnson then beat Ken Livingstone in that first campaign, 53% to 47%. And Will, that meant he was...
You're messing with the wrong guy.
Even if some of the stories that he became embroiled in never really went beyond the kind of local London media.
He was a right royal pain for the Tory party, because first he had power and they didn't, and then when Cameron Osborne came in, he used to lob the most enormous rocks, and it was a real frustration for all of us who ran his media engagements in London, because often you'd have an event planned for, say, a Monday morning, which we hoped would certainly get some decent London coverage, and may even stretch to some national coverage, and it would always be attended by national journalists. And then on a Sunday night, he'd send you his Telegraph column, which had nothing to do with the event on Monday and everything to do with poking holes at Cameron Osborne or others, or said something controversial. And suddenly you had to marshal not sort of 10 or 15 journalists, but 50 journalists on a Monday morning, none of whom wanted to come and talk about the London event that he was attending. So, I mean, it was classic Boris. It was, crash through things, cause chaos, and I think a lot of it was deliberately done in order to promote brand Boris. It was both enormous fun, but enormously frustrating at the same time.
And Alex, was he just doing this sort of scattergun approach to policy, or did he have some priorities? It's just that we couldn't always tell what they were.
I think it's probably fair to say it was quite scattergun. I remember in the early days before he won the election, I sat down with him and I said to him, "Okay, Boris, imagine you are mayor for a week. Tell me what that week would be. Not in any detail, but just tell me what your priorities would be." And the conversation basically went me asking the question and him saying, well, gosh, and of course no answer came. And that sort of summed up his approach to the first term. He was extremely reactive. For example, he had campaigned heavily in winning the mayoralty on knife crime and youth violence, but then didn't really knuckle down and come up with an actual plan to tackle the issue whilst in office. He responded well to the financial crisis in the sense that he immediately understood that it was unwise to heap all the scorn on the City of London and the financial services industry. And he immediately saw that he should be the one to champion them. He was very good at that, at taking a live issue and crafting a fairly instant position for himself on it. But the detailed, hard, let's face it, slightly boring work of actually changing a city and driving an administration, it was not his forte. Yes, the first couple of years were chaos. He couldn't get a settled team. There was a constant carousel of deputy mayors being appointed, deputy mayors resigning for various indiscretions and whatnot.